All right, it's recording. It's all yours.
All right, do you want to do a brief intro and let everyone know what's up?
That sounds great. Thank you all for attending. This is our second webinar for the NATS Personal Learning Network. The chat window on the side, if you guys want to go ahead and open that up, you can chat to everyone or a specific person. That will let us know if you have any questions during the webinar. And Sarah Cooper is going to present on what science in Nebraska is going to look like. Sarah, is there anything I'm missing?
I don't think so.
All right. I'm going to mute myself then, and I'm going to let you take over.
All right. Thanks, Shauna. Welcome. Welcome, everyone. Thanks for joining us as we're trying out this professional learning network. And thanks to Shauna for letting me be a guest host here. So welcome to the Cube. I don't know what you can see. I have 3 screens here. So I have a camera in one and stuff going on in others. So welcome to the Cube at the State Office Building. If you can see what's behind me, pretty exciting. So to get started, just a little bit about where we are, what the vision of science is for Nebraska. Think you can see. So as I move through some things, let me know if you're not able to see what I'm trying to show you. So this all began when I first came into this position, starting to just go around the state and asking the question, what is science and why is science important? I think we really, now more than ever in our political climate, thinking about the answers to those questions is really important. And so the answers to those questions kind of have given rise to where we're going next and what our vision of science is. So if you look at this graphic, you can see that I did break the data down a little bit and try to see, is there any consistency in how different stakeholders across the state are thinking about science? And as you can see here, world tends to come up. Also, why is science important? Again, another breakdown, but you can see how teachers and scientists are thinking about why it's important, parents, general, business and industry, and then our students, what they think of science and why it's important. Anyone have questions, comments over those 2 graphics? So don't be afraid to jump in at any time and ask me some questions. So I'm going to try to get out of here. So that kind of gave rise to thinking about where are we headed with science. So hopefully you have a new screen here that you can see. This one. So as we started thinking about the standards revision process, where we were, where we're going, again, I was asking the questions to teachers, to stakeholders across the state. What's our vision? What do we want for science education in Nebraska? And I heard a lot of, not just from business and industry, but all across the state, hearing things about our 4 C's, collaboration, critical thinking, creativity, communication, and how important those were as we think about what science education is and how we want science education to look. Also, another word that came up, another C that I really like, was curiosity. Lots of teachers really wanting our students to be curious, to remain curious, and really to move from this world of learning about to figuring out. So as we started the standards revision process, that's how we started. We started with the 50 writers coming together, and we talked about our vision. What is it that we want for science education? And then we moved to thinking about, well, how do we create standards that support that kind of a vision? What do they look like? What do they entail? So this update I sent in January. So if you didn't see this, that means you're not getting my quarterly updates, and you can contact me directly. I'll make sure you get added to a mailing list. So we have been through all of our writing meetings and almost all of our editing meetings now. So I can tell you more firmly what our standards are going to look like, what's new. So this graphic gives a brief rundown of what is new to the standards that are going to be coming with adoption in September of 2017. And first of all, there's 2 levels of specificity. And that is not just new to science, that's going to be new to all of our content areas in curriculum and instruction, including all of the career and technical education standards, that we will have 2 levels of specificity. The first level is our standards. Those are those broad, overarching, content-based statements. Think of them as our goals for learning. And then that's followed by our indicators, and that's really that intersection with assessment. Those are performance-based statements. One of the reasons to going to the 2 levels of specificity is one of the goals of the department and the goals of the board is that we're going to create an online interactive platform where all of our standards intersect. So we'll be following similar guidelines for how we label and identify the standards and the indicators, so that as those get programmed in that online world, it's all interacting. So that's really exciting. Second, what's new is that our standards for science will be grade level for K through 8. So we've been in this world, we've lived in this world where we've had a K2 band, a 3-5, 6-8, and 9-12. So that's all shifting to grade level K to 8. We had lots of conversations about this shift because that's big for science, although they've been doing it in English language arts and math and social studies. This is new to science. What we kept seeing in the public input, so we gathered public input before we went into the standards revision process. We saw lots of public input around more specificity, more cohesive standards, and in particular, lots of comments about, can we have grade level? Let us get to, instead of us spending so much time figuring out who's teaching what, let's really focus our efforts and our time on how to teach that best. So I think this moving to that grade level standards is going to help us a lot. And in particular, as we had conversations about our students that are really in need of support, when we look at our schools that are our needs improvement schools, they have highly mobile student populations. And you think about that, you think of those students in transition from district to district within a year, and throughout the years that they might be missing huge gaps. If certain content was taught in one grade in one district, they might repeat that in another district, leaving a huge gap in their learning. And so we really think that shift to the grade level is going to help those highly mobile students. When we started looking at 6th to 8th grade, we know that across the state we have lots of models for what that looks like. We know that we have lots of districts that follow a domain model. So that means they might teach life science in 6th grade and earth science in 7th and 8th and physical. We talked about pros and cons to that type of a model versus an integrated model where there's pieces of all of the domains in every year. And after lots of discussion around this and lots of anecdotal evidence around, in particular, students getting hung up on math and being turned off to science. So you see that happen in physical science. And we know that there's a lot of data now showing how critical the middle school level years are for determining whether students are going to pursue STEM careers and additional science courses in high school. So thinking about all of the data we have, thinking about how our K through 6 is already kind of an integrated model because we were looking at the topics level of NGSS as our model for forming standards, we really thought a 6th grade integrated model would be what would be best for our students. After looking at states, multiple states across the nation and looking at the different models for how you could move those standards around, and listening to advice from other states like Iowa in particular that said, don't select your own model, follow somebody else so that resources are going to be created for you. We evaluated all those models, and the review team really liked the California integrated model. They found that in particular that model, when we looked at our math standards, that the math and what we were looking at for the physical science, that those math pieces really aligned very well. So while not identical to the California model, there were some small shifts, some small changes. It very, very closely follows that model. Our new standards will have engineering design integrated through K-12, and I'm going to show you a sample of what I've been working on last week with our edited document. You can see that. And some of the key features are that they are 3D indicators. So what we mean by that is that as we look to the framework and the vision of science that the framework was calling for, we do have all of those pieces, the disciplinary core ideas, or cross-cutting concepts in science and engineering practices in every indicator. We weighed and considered very heavily looking at the topics arrangement of NGSS as a model versus the DCI arrangement. And in the end, the writing team really liked that topic arrangement, that it really spoke to the way standards and topics resonate with students and teachers and the connections that it made. So some other highlights that are coming, and I will show you these. These will be our first college and career ready standards for science. The writing team felt it very necessary to really think about Nebraska connections and giving our standards a Nebraska context. So wherever possible, and this is something that's still in development, we still need to think about and reach out more related to this, but we're trying to think about ways that where does it make sense to bring in things that are key to Nebraska, either in business and industry, to our natural resources that we have available to us, and draw attention to that in our standards. We also have been challenged with looking at civic connections. So it is possible that these standards might be labeled college, career, and civic ready. That all depends upon how soon the board is able to come up with a definition of what is meant by civic readiness. So we did think about the relationship between science and what it means to be civic ready. And in particular, we kind of teased out, we didn't want to lose the civic connections if the definition of civic readiness is not identified by the time these standards are adopted, knowing that we're going to have these standards for 7 years. We're trying to be proactive, and we have a very good start to a white paper that talks about citizen science as a means toward civic engagement and civic readiness. So we've identified in the standards places where there are citizen science opportunities related to our standards. We are also taking a close look at computer science connections. So at the department, we have had multiple stakeholders really kind of pushing on us, trying to leverage development of computer science standards. And at this point, we do not want to create computer science standards as a separate set of standards. So we're really looking closely at where the science and technology and that computer science, where those fit very, very closely. And we did have a group work on kind of doing a brief alignment to that, and we'll go more deeply into that. So things that will be coming to support these standards, we will have a teacher implementation guide that includes clarification statements, evidence statements, connections to our other content standards, beginning with math and ELA, and then those will build out as we're able to do more of those crosswalks. We're looking to develop and build in, so tied to that teacher implementation guide, if you think about that in a living online, live kind of world, that the standards would be linked to some instructional supports that have exemplars of 3-dimensional lessons, some sample curriculum that we are working with some state stakeholders and some national stakeholders to help develop some of those exemplar pieces. So now that you know a little bit about where we're going, let me share another document with you here. So this is what I believe is going to be our final cover for our new standards, unless of course we do add that civic readiness piece here. So this is what the cover is going to look like. And if we turn the cover and get into the inside, I'm going to show you what nobody has seen yet, except a very, very small group. My document, which is it here? Let's see here. So is there anyone that has any dying questions here while I'm trying to pull up another document? Okay. So if anything is sharing yet. All right, can everyone see something that says kindergarten? Yes, okay. So this is what the policy document of the standards is shaping up to look like. So like I had mentioned, there will be a teacher implementation guide, which will have the standards in addition to some additional supports. But this is the document that we typically think of seeing, our policy document and our standards. We've started thinking about somebody that might pick up this document and want to know, what is my student in kindergarten going to be learning? So we've started to structure kind of a one-page, this is what is going to go on in kindergarten, and some of the questions that students are going to be investigating. We've tried to talk about what the pieces of the standards as we start to look those apart and see the three dimensions of that and how that unfolds. Talk about that. How the cross-cutting concepts in the science and engineering practices are going to be used throughout the document and how that ties into instruction. And then we move into our standards. So the identifiers, SC is science, all of our standards will start that way. So again, this is going to be that format that we see throughout the department and all of our standards. Kindergarten will be the grade level, and this is the first topic. So the first topic, science kindergarten, first topic is forces and interactions, pushes and pulls. And then this is our standard level. The writers really wanted the standards. If we think about the goal of standards, think about the goal of indicators, we know that the indicators is where the assessment aligns. The standard is kind of the cue to instruction. What does instruction look like, feel like? And so you'll notice that there's a trend, that there's a pattern, that all of our standards include gather, analyze, and communicate evidence, followed by something at the topic level. So that follows very closely that where this originated from is if you look at the science and engineering practices is outlined in a framework. It is obtain, analyze, and communicate is one of the practices. When we looked at the Georgia model took that science and engineering practice. If we think about what we want students doing, yeah, we want them going in and getting some information. We want them to think about it and process it. And then we want them to communicate using evidence about what they know. So when you tease apart that science and engineering practice, it's really kind of how we want to engage kids through instruction. And the Georgia model of standards did something very similar. So we toyed with these words, and they were all chosen very thoughtfully. So gather was chosen over obtain because obtain feels very passive. It feels like, just sit there and passively obtain information, versus gather is very active. Let's go out and get it. Let's find these pieces and bring it back together. The model, another model of instruction that we did see introduced by Brett Molden and Roger Bybee and Nicole Paulson last summer, that comes from their book, A Vision and Plan for Science Teaching and Learning. They use an instructional model that uses gather, reason, and communicate. And while we really like reason, analyze was kind of artificially chosen because we want our standards to be at a DOK 4. So when you look at Webb's depth of knowledge, knowing that we want to push assessment. We want to push assessment beyond DOK, depth of knowledge 1 and 2 levels, because we want our students critically thinking, and we're not going to get there if we're not pushing that depth of knowledge. And how we're bound in assessment with our standards, we are bound at that standard level. So we wanted standards. We wanted to push that DOK, that depth of knowledge, as far as we could. Reason doesn't show up. It's very ambiguous on what that is for a depth of knowledge. So analyze does fit a depth of knowledge 4. So that's where those words came from and why they're important. For those of you that want to know more about the gather, reason, and communicate kind of way of thinking about instruction and lesson planning, I encourage you to look at A Vision and Plan for Science Teaching and Learning by Brett Molding, Roger Bybee, and Nicole Paulson. So we have our standard, and next comes our indicators. So the indicators are three-dimensional, so everything in bold is the science and engineering practice. What's underlined is the cross-cutting concept, and then the rest is mostly related to the core idea and the content. So to draw attention to, as we think about what we know about standards, how we've been delivering instruction, we're pretty comfortable with students doing science. We know what that looks like. We know what inquiry looks like. We want them asking questions and designing investigations, performing mathematical models. So those we didn't feel like we needed to draw as much attention to, so we left those bold. We know the content. The content hasn't changed. It has perhaps been narrowed in scope and laser focused so that we can go deeper with these standards. But what's really new to this way of thinking is the cross-cutting concepts. So we really wanted to draw attention to that piece because it's through the cross-cutting concepts that we really get the student reasoning and student understanding. So all of the cross-cutting concepts are drawn attention to by these symbols, and they'll be a key to the symbols, but this one happens to be cause and effect. The gears indicate a connection to engineering. So in a living document, when this goes live and is online, these will be linked that will take you exactly to those engineering connections so that you can see those. This is our civic connection. So you can see that, and again, this will be tied. There'll be a nice document that supports these citizen science projects that can be incorporated as part of instruction here. And again, not something you have to do, but just showing that there are these strong connections to that civic readiness piece through citizen science. And this one is my favorite. So after multiple iterations of this icon, this is our Nebraska specific icon. The writers felt very strongly after being at Rose Sanctuary to develop these standards that they wanted something that kind of symbolized that place to them. So this is a crane with the river in the background. And so this will be our icon that keys our Nebraska place-based content. Like I said, this is still kind of in the development phases here. And we'll continue to add more richness to the Nebraska connections. As we go out for public input, we'll be asking for more of that as you think about how you would bring Nebraska context to these standards and how we can draw attention to that and really make them our own. The small gray text, this is the assessment boundaries. So these did come exactly from the Next Generation Science Standards as a model to communicate very explicitly to our assessment department when they take these and start tearing them apart, where do we want our boundaries? So again, this is another piece that we looked at very carefully, made sure that those boundaries were communicating the level to which we expect our students to get to. So that's a sneak peek at our new standards. Like I said, I just was working on this Friday, so we're still playing with what this looks like.
I have to look at our timeline.
Yeah.
And find some.
So that is all I have to share. What I would love to do now is answer any questions that you might have.
Great.
I'll move you guys over so it's more like I'm looking at you.
So when are we looking at getting copies of these out to the public?
Amy, that is a great question. So the timeline says April or May, something like that. And the reason I can't give you an answer yet is because we're not on the board agenda. So before I can release these in full form to the public, I do have to have school board permission to do that. So since it has taken me until now to get this into a document that looks a little more finalized, I'm hoping, let's see, we can get on the April agenda, which means once we get approval, they can go out after that. At the latest, we'll get on the May agenda, and then they go out right after the May board meetings. And those are always the Thursday and Friday, first Thursday and Friday of the month. I can send out pieces. So if there's something that you really want to see, please let me know and I can send out pieces. I just cannot send out the entire document.
I think it's just that fear of the unknown, but I like the idea that you have links so people can hook to something else. I think that's usable, because that kind of clears up a lot when you have at least a place to go with some of them, because it kind of looks to me like some things have moved a lot.
Yes, there is some content that is moved. So if you kind of want a preview of that on my website, McREL did do a comparison study of our Nebraska 2010 standards to next generation science standards. So I want to reiterate, I probably should have started with this. Nebraska is not adopting next generation science standards, and hopefully you can see that through our multiple iterations and things we've added and enhanced there. But because, you know, that is the model, that is like our NSES that we've had in the past, next generation science standards was at the table used as a model. So we do have that comparison study that McREL did, and you can start looking at where was it in our 2010 standards, where is it going to be. And for the most part, until we get to, well, I guess because we were grade level, grade band instead of grade level, there are some things that shifted an entire grade band. But yes, we'll see the levels. And I'm happy, like I said, to share pieces so people can get a head start on looking at that. We will create some of those supporting documents showing the crosswalk, helping districts along with a gap analysis. We're working on an implementation plan. And I should have mentioned that not only just for science, but at the State Department, for the first time ever, we're talking about a framework for standards, rollout, and implementation, what that looks like specifically to science. We have a group working on that. And the reality is this is going to be it's going to be 5 years before we're at full implementation. And we know that these standards are going to have tremendous shifts, not in only how we think about where our content is and the resources we need to support that, but some shifts instructionally in the professional development needed to support that. So a 5-year implementation plan, and we'll have all of that ready to roll out with these standards too. Some graphics that will show what should happen in each of the years we move through the implementation, that kind of supports the NDE and our ESUs will be able to provide districts for support. So it's not just here's the standards and go. There is going to be a very thoughtful plan about moving the state forward cohesively as we move through the implementation. Trying to see what Tammy says here. Would we be using the new standards in August 2017? No. By all means, you can move in that direction, Tammy. But the actual, they go to the boards in September. So during the joint NATS and NATM co-conference in Kearney, if you didn't know that's coming up, all of you listening, September 7th through the 9th in Kearney, I will be attending board meetings. So it'll be a really exciting time to be at the joint NATS and NATM conference, because as these get hopefully adopted, fingers crossed, there'll be a big celebration. So that means once they're adopted by the state school board, your local school boards have 1 year to either adopt our standards or equal or more rigorous standards. So that whole first year from September 2017 to September 2018 is all about getting districts, your local districts, to adopt new science standards.
So when you look at testing, are you looking at testing just 5th grade still, or is that going to be, I know, I didn't know if there was an answer to that question.
No, so where I have been today is we just put out an RFP, for a new test vendor. What's really exciting about what we're looking at is a system of assessments now. So we asked all of the vendors to submit what they think a system of assessments looks like. So that includes formative, interim, and summative. And typically we think of state offering support and or doing anything, it's only around statewide summative. So this is really exciting for us to start thinking about a system. So that has been my question. So currently we test in 5th and 8th grade and ACT at 11. That will not change. Statewide summative will be at 5th grade and 8th grade. But as we look at the formative classroom level formative supports and the interim supports, those will be grade level. So I'm making a really strong case and really drilling these vendors on what can you offer for science and what does this look like and how can you do a growth model. But the intention is that yes, statewide summative will still be just those grade band endpoints, but all of the supports that we're providing all along the way are going to be grade level.
Thank you.
Thanks for the question, Amy.
Well, thank you guys for all attending. And this is one of the visions and purposes of the webinar, was to help ease our mind a little bit with all these new changes that are coming and where we're going and where we're headed. So thank you guys for attending, and please reach out if you have any questions or ideas for professional development that you want to see from NATS in the future. We want to continue this webinar throughout next year too. So maybe you have one of those topics that we want to address. And Sarah's been really great about helping us come up with topics and leading this discussion about where science is going in Nebraska.
And I'm always here. Please share with me your concerns, questions. I know there's going to be a lot. We know that communication is going to be really important. So hopefully by forming this network and NATS taking the lead with getting teachers across the state engaged, tell all your friends and send your questions, send your ideas for future topics to Shauna, and we'll make sure that the board will make sure that they get experts across the state that can help answer questions and move us forward.
And
Shauna,
yeah, go ahead.
Shauna, do we have a topic in a next meeting webinar set yet, or you're looking for the next topic?
Nope, we have topic meetings set through May. Sarah?
Yeah, do you want to share what those are? Do you have those handy?
Yep, let me pull it up on my.
Shauna, we lost you. Dan, did you have some ideas in mind?
Sorry, I was being all called.
I was just wanted to make sure I got it on the schedule.
Gotcha.
All right, our next webinar is on phenomenon, and it'll be the last Monday in March. So I was just looking at my calendar. What is that? The 28th, I think. And then the April topic is 3-dimensional learning. And then in May, we were going to try to pull it together. We weren't sure about everybody's out of school schedules and whether or not we could make it work. But we have gather, reason, communicate, and lesson development. So that's what we have for topics for this year. And then we've got some ideas for some other topics for next year. March 27th will be the phenomenon session.
And we really want other people across the state leading these. I need to twist Ellen Kramer's arm a little bit more at Millard. She has some expertise with doing some professional development related to phenomenon, so we're hoping to take advantage of that. And again, capitalize on all of our human resources across the state. This is open to everyone to share what they know and what they can do.
And I did get this webinar recorded. I will get it up on the NATS website and tweet out, put on Facebook the link if I get it up. I kind of messed up the first recording on the first PLN webinar, and Angela and I are going to make a cheat sheet for Twitter, basically.
So Shauna, there's a question from Mary Kay about what does she need to do to make sure she's invited to each session. Have you decided, can we post like the links on the Nats website so everybody just knows to go there in the schedule maybe?
Yes, that's a great idea. And I'll try to send out reminders on Facebook and Twitter. I didn't send out specific invitations. I wasn't sure how to reach everybody, but yes, I'll put the links up. I'll do that in the next week or so for the next couple of meetings or webinars. I'll put it up on our website and get that so you guys can find it.
Like we said, spread the word, tell your friends.
Any more questions?
Just want to thank you, Sarah. This was helpful.
You're welcome, Dan.
Yes, thank you, Sarah.
No problem. Bye, friends.
See you all. Thank you for attending.